Good morning.
Good morning.
So, today's lesson is a little shorter than what we've been having.
Oh, surely not.
Well, otherwise, it would be too long if we went all the way to the end of the book, and so it's kind of split at a reasonable location. So, okay. So, So Esther, kind of being smart and wily and clever, she had two feasts in which she invited Haman and Xerxes, the king of the Persian Empire. And on the second one, she pointed to Haman and exposed him for who he is. Basically, a power-hungry dude who wants to bring harm to the empire by killing a bunch of people simply because he hates them. So it's not as if this would have brought good to the empire or stability, but he wrote his edict in such a way, or at least he explained it to Xerxes in such a way that it seemed like a good idea to get rid of these people who follow their own laws and do their own things and are really, really kind of at odds with the rest of the Persian Empire. Of course, that's really not true. They do have their own customs, but that's the case with lots of people in the Persian Empire, right? So, so Haman gets what's coming to him, and then of course not a whole lot happens, okay, and then we begin to get a little insight into Mordecai. So he even though he hasn't been publicly given this position, he's now serving as Haman's replacement, okay, and so if anyone wants to see the king, they have to go through him. Okay, and so in chapter 8, we realize that Esther has to go to King Xerxes unannounced, just like she did in chapter 7. And so how do we know that's the case? Because the very same part of the thing that they said in chapter 7, they said in verse 8. And then, of course, the text adds some stuff as to why else she is there. Okay, and then she also the king holds out his scepter, saying, "I accept you." Well, at this point, that's pretty much all he can do, except it does make you think what's going on, because Haman hasn't done anything to rescind the edict, and the day is approaching. So I'm thinking, what is he? Is he just thinking that if he does nothing, it'll just kind of, people will forget about it and it won't happen? Or is he thinking he might do something like at the last minute? I don't know. But Esther's concerned approaches the king and, of course, tells him the whole situation. And he says, okay, both you, and that's a plural you and Mordecai, or y'all, write the new edict. Okay? So the thing concerning the edict is, how does the edict have to be written? Because remember, if an edict goes out from the king, once it goes out officially, it may not be rescinded. Even he's not allowed to rescind it, because any rescission of a former edict, in a sense, is a weakening of his authority. So he can't rescind the former edict, which says, kill these people. Everyone kind of knows it's the Jews, but they're really not named specifically. So it has to be written in a way that nullifies its effects, but not officially rescinds it. Okay? So it's walking a fine line, isn't it? So and so to actually know what the edict said, we veered off into the Septuagint last week, and now we're going to stay there to see what the rest of the edict says. And then we'll go back to the Masoretic text, which is in Hebrew. Okay, because the Hebrew text doesn't list the edicts. It'll list the effects the edict has and how people responded, but it doesn't do that. Okay, so if we go to page 1, we will see the new edict, that is the one written by Mordecai, continued. Therefore, you, who's the you here? The people in the Persian Empire, right? So, therefore you, all you people in the Persian Empire, will do well not to act on the letters sent by Haman. So, don't follow them even though they're not rescinded. Okay, sure. Okay. Sent by Haman, son of Hammedatha. Now remember, what did Mordecai say about his ancestry? If you remember, he's really an Agagite, which is an ethnic group which has had a long hatred against the Jews. But in the edict, he said he was Macedonian. And the reason why is because who's the great threat to the Persian Empire right now? Macedonia, right? The Greeks, but, right? Philip of Macedon. And so they're on the ascendancy, and Persia is on the slow decline. Okay? So let's vilify him by saying he's the enemy we're worried about. Okay? Son of Hamadatha, because he who produced them has been hanged at the gates of Susa with his entire household. For God Almighty, ruler of all things, swiftly rendered a well-earned punishment for him. Okay? Post a copy of this document publicly in every place, making it known the Jews may observe their own customs. Come to their aid against anyone who attacks them on the day set for the destruction, the 13th day of the 12th month Adar. Okay? So this is the whole kind of fine line thing, right? Is the edict officially rescinded? No. But what the people are supposed to do, don't do it. Okay? So even though the edict still stands, don't do it. Okay? Whom does this edict specifically name, which Haman's earlier edict did not? Yeah, he mentions Jews. Okay, Haman's edict did not, but it was written in such a way where if you read it, you would have to go, he's talking about the Jews. And the Jews knew that. That's why they were in kind of a state of anxiety, because the edict basically gave anybody who hated them freedom to do whatever. Okay? And so when you have this edict, kind of that's kind of empire-wide, you could have people kind of acting on it before the date, or people making themselves known. You wait till the day comes, right? So in a sense, it will kind of expose who really hates the Jews for whatever reason. Because now, we're allowed to beat you guys up, we're allowed to kill you, we're et cetera, et cetera. So this allows kind of the dark side of people, lets that to be exposed. So since it's been some time since the edict, they'll know who's out to get them, most likely. You know, I guess you might have a few gentle folk out there who will wait their time and be courteous until the day, right? Okay. Well, anyway, so what is supposed to happen if somebody does attack the Jews on this 13th day? Did you catch that? Come to their aid against anyone who attacks them on the day set for their destruction. So if this happens, then people are allowed to defend them. Okay? And so that's how it's written, because the edict's not officially rescinded. Okay? So talk about doublespeak. Wow. Well, let's continue with the edict. Okay? For God who holds, listen, you know Mordecai or a Jewish person had to write this, because listen to the way it's written. For God who holds power over all things has made this day of gladness, not destruction, for his chosen people. There's no way that Xerxes would have written this, even though it has his signet seal on it. Okay. For your part, Jews, celebrate this outstanding day among your solemn feasts with all rejoicing. So what is the edict now saying if you're Jewish? The 13th day, which was meant for your destruction, what does the edict now say? Yeah, celebrate this outstanding day among your solemn feasts with all rejoicing. Well, we know why, right? Because instead of being killed, they're not killed, and in fact, you know, the rest of the empire can come to their aid. Okay, so yeah, I would say this is a day of rejoicing. It's like you're on the hangman's gallows, as we understand it, not the Persian Empire, and the governor pardons you. You're like, yay, right? and you had the noose around your neck, but the bottom one didn't fall open, and so now that becomes a day of rejoicing. Well, we know what it'll be called in the Jewish calendar. It'll be called Purim. Hmm. Right, Purim. Yeah, it's still a Jewish festival to this day. Yeah. So there was enough people in the Persian Empire who ended up, because they could have gone back to Judea or Israel, but they didn't. And so, but there's enough back and flow that it does end up becoming part of Israel's celebratory feasts. Don?
Okay, but declaring a new edict and not rescinding the old one,
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of like declaring war between the two cultures. And in the Persian, the way everything was written.
It's, I mean, if you live within the Persian Empire, you really know that the previous edict is being rescinded without actually being rescinded. So,
I understand.
yeah. Mhm.
By writing the first one,
Right.
okay, and then writing the second one,
Okay.
not rescinding the first one, the way the second one was written, the two cultures.
Well, yeah, you're right. It's like this one still stands, but don't do it. Yeah. And if you're just a regular dude in the Persian Empire, you know that there are two different authors behind each edict. I mean, hello. So, and of course it has Xerxes' seal, so it comes with his authority. So it doesn't matter who actually wrote it. The thing is that the king, it's in effect. Okay? It's kind of like if you listen to a presidential speech, the president usually has a lot of speech writers. Doesn't matter who wrote the speech, who's responsible for what comes out of the president's mouth. Right? The president. Usually. Okay. Let's see. But now and in the future, may it, that is, the feast, right? May it commemorate your deliverance for you and for the well-inclined Persians. Hint, hint. What is this saying? If you want to be a well-inclined Persian, you want this to be part of something you celebrate, even if you're not Jewish, or you may not celebrate it with the fervor the Jews do, but, right? So this is another kind of huge kind of hint to say, don't even think about carrying out the old edict. Because not only do we not want you to carry it out, but we want this to be something celebrated by everyone. And if you are a well-inclined Persian, you will celebrate. Right? Oh, we don't want to be a bad Persian, because bad things happen to bad Persians. Okay? But for those who plot destruction against us, may it stand as a remembrance of their ruin. Okay. So, what happened to Haman? Right? And so this edict is what? In a sense, lets everybody know, don't try to bring ruin to the Persian Empire. So, yeah. So in all of this, there is a warning. Don't you get all crazy and start rebelling and doing bad things against the Persian Empire. And it is kind of bad. Think about this. When you give people's baser nature free rein to kind of do havoc, right? What happens? Bad stuff. So in a sense, it's kind of, what do you call it, when people are in a mob or a group and they do something that they normally wouldn't individually, but they get carried away with the situation, right? And there you are. So, kind of that group think, it's quite dangerous. I may have shared this with you, but I remember, I think I was in grade 6 or something, and back then parents didn't take kids to school. You walked or you took the school bus, right? And so So I took the bus. And so, every day we're waiting there, and there's this car that sits there near the bus, where the bus picks us up. And it sat there for like 2 weeks, and what's going on? One morning while we're waiting there, one of the kids, he goes, well, he gets a rock and he smashes the window. And the next thing you know, we're all like monkeys, breaking the car, jumping up and down on it, smashing the headlights. We would have never done it. But it just took that one act, and I don't know, chaos ensued. So, so that edict even could be dangerous if it got out of hand. So this is written in a way where it's going to, to a large degree, it's only an edict of response, not of initiation, right? Before, you can go and kill the Jews. Now, only do what's needed if someone's out to get them. So it's going to be more constrained. Okay, has a different tone. Okay, so this is it's a completely 180, as you mentioned, and contradictory. But if you live in the empire and the king contradicts himself, you just go with it. Okay, because not to do so can be dangerous to your life. Okay. Well, let's turn to page 2, and we'll continue with the edict. Every city and province, without exception, which does not act according to these instructions shall be mercilessly destroyed with spear and fire, made impassable not only to men, but even to wild animals and birds forever. Okay, what is this saying here? If you're stupid enough to try to rise up and kill the Jews, this is what's going to happen to you. So he says, what? Not only will it be bad, but this is hyperbole, isn't it? Impassable not only to men, but even to wild animals and birds forever. In other words, it's going to be really bad. Don't go there, guys. Okay? The question is, what if you're in an area where there's a significant group for some reason who hates the Jews? They might go, there's enough Jew haters here where we can get away with this. So there's still going to be bad stuff happening. Okay? But it will be greatly diminished because to do so comes with the threat of punishment and death, not blessing. Okay? So, you'd have to have a pretty bad hatred or something. Okay. Let copies of the decree be posted throughout the kingdom, and let all Jews be ready on that day to fight against those who oppose them. Okay. So the Jews have free reign, but only to defend themselves. Okay. We're going to find out what Esther does later. She's going to do something meant to have a deterrent effect. Okay? So let's see how people understand the edict. Okay, we kind of have an idea, right? Okay, the other one, I'm not going to do this one. Well, I'm not going to do the other one because of this one. Okay? So we're now returning to the Masoretic text. Okay? So let's turn to Esther chapter 8. Okay? So remember the Septuagint was kind of written later and inserted in there. So we kind of have to allow for differences in style and so on and so forth. Okay? Verses 11 through 14. Well, here we start out with the word saying. Okay. So we'll just start with the king on verse 11. Okay? The king allowed the Jews who were in every city to gather and defend their lives, to destroy, kill, and to annihilate any armed force of any people or province that might attack them. It's basically, this is the Reader's Digest of the edict, right? Children and women including, and to plunder their goods. That's odd, right? But the Septuagint doesn't really mention plundering goods, does it? Okay, at least the edict. But here the Masoretic text says that. And we certainly know that Haman had planned to plunder the Jewish goods because, in a sense, he bribed the king saying, okay, after all this happens, you're going to get a whole bunch of wealth. And so, and Haman would become the second wealthiest man in the kingdom. Of course, Xerxes the wealthiest. Okay. On the day throughout all the provinces of King Xerxes on the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month of Adar. A copy of what was written was to be issued as a decree in every province, being publicly displayed to all peoples, and the Jews were to be ready on that day to take vengeance on their enemies. So this is what? Not the edict itself, but for the most part taking what the edict said. Now, okay, this is what happens. So the couriers mounted on their swift horses that were used in the king's service rode out hurriedly, urged by the king's command, and the decree was issued in Susa the citadel. So the command goes out by the Persian Pony Express, and it's posted publicly, so everyone should know, at least within a few days, right? So you'd have to be sleeping under a rock not to know such a monumental shift. Okay. So a couple things, okay, from the Hebrew text. So the word gather, I think that's in verse 11. Okay. So let's look at verse 11 there. Well, if I can find 11, but anyways, so yeah, so it says that's to assemble, which can also mean muster an army. So the text behind this is really kind of, it implies Jewish people, you get free rein to do what's necessary. Not what you may want, but what's necessary. And then, of course, take vengeance. A couple of verses later, that actually means to take revenge on those who actually want or attempt to mete out violence on you. Not just because you don't like a dude. Okay? So the character of the edict is different. Okay? So if you just go and kill somebody because you don't like him and you're Jewish, you're still going to be held accountable with whatever court and law system exists. Okay? And for an empire to function well, there has to be some type of justice. Otherwise, people have to buy into the system, because if you don't buy into the system, everything just collapses, right? And so, there has to be enough reward and functionality and some semblance of justice so that everyone kind of goes along. Okay? All right. So, now let's see what happens with Mordecai. Because unofficially, what did Mordecai become? Well, he took Haman's replacement, or he was Haman's replacement. Okay, so let's look at verses 15 through 17, shall we? Then Mordecai went out from the presence of the king in royal robes of blue and white, with a great golden crown and a robe of fine linen and purple. So what's going on here? He's officially being recognized as the king's vizier, the right-hand man, second in command. Yeah. And so he has all kind of the stately royal accoutrements that come along with that. Okay? And the city of Susa shouted and rejoiced. Well, okay. I mean, I guess Haman was kind of a bad guy, so maybe people were glad. But, most people don't really know all the specifics. They just know that, that they're supposed to do that. So they kind of do. Not like North Korea, where if you don't clap hard enough, you'll get executed. But, still, it's how things are done. Okay? So, which is, in a sense, a lot of this we don't even really understand, do we? Because we live in a culture where, well, I could call the president an idiot if I don't like him. We just say, Mr. President, you're an idiot. So, yes, it's Purim. Mm-hmm. Yep. So, mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. So, well, let's continue on with Mordecai's kind of ascendancy, okay? So, I forgot where I was at, so yeah, so I'm like, where is it? Okay, yeah. The Jews had light and gladness and joy and honor. So here we have a quadruple word barrage, and we'll get into that in a moment, okay? And in every province and in every city, wherever the king's command and his edict reached, which should be everywhere, unless, one of the horses broke a leg or something, and there might be right? There was gladness and joy. So gladness and joy is repeated. So, of course, we want to recognize that, that of course there was light and honor, but gladness and joy is the most kind of emphasized here. Okay, among the Jews, a feast and holiday. And many from the peoples of the country declared themselves Jews, for fear of the Jews had fallen on them. This is going to be weird when they said declared themselves Jews. What? We'll get into that and what that kind of means. So in other words, there's now a power shift, right? And when there's a power shift, what happens? Oh, well, hey, a Jewish guy second in the kingdom, and so I better not be mean to them anymore. Okay, so a lot of people kind of change their attitudes. Perhaps some converted. Okay, so if you study the history of Christianity, okay, by the time Christianity becomes legal, about 1/4 of the Roman Empire is Christian. Okay, and then Constantine officially makes Christianity a legal religion because he's at a crossroads. I can't kill them all because that'll destroy the empire. And yet, we can't continue doing things as we're doing, pretending that it's an illegal religion. His wife was a Christian, right? Now, he maybe not. It's hard to know for certain, okay? And so after Christianity is legalized, what happens? Right? There's no room to go to church anymore. Those who are maybe too scared are now okay, and some people simply become Christian because they go, hey, it's in my best interest. And so, there you have it, right? And so, and that's not weird. In the 1950s, okay, what happened to church attendance in America if we look at the entire history of a nation? We had the highest church attendance per capita ever in the history of our nation. Well, it was a time when everyone was scared of the Soviet Union, and they were atheists, and President Eisenhower declared, every good American go to the church of your choice. And so in a sense, this became almost a patriotic duty. I'm not going to say it was that strong, but there was that sort of fervor. And so, and with the baby boom and that, boom, the churches were just packed. Okay? And then, of course, the 60s came along and, right? The emphasis was no longer there. Okay? So we kind of see that thing happening. Okay? But first, let's take a look at a couple things. Light and gladness and joy and honor. So these four words is basically, through rhetoric, is showing a reversal of what happened previously. Mourning, fasting, weeping, and lamenting. See? So it's like, bloop, complete reversal of what was happening before. Okay? But the two middle terms, gladness and joy, mentioned twice. That means it's emphasized. And those pairing of terms in the Old Testament often describes uplifted spirits, right? Often in response to God's presence or deliverance. And that's what's happening here in Esther, right? So through all the workings of human history and the people involved in this, through Esther, right? Esther was kind of the main catalyst whom God used. Mordecai and Xerxes' blessing. Now this happens, okay? So, and what takes place even with some of the Gentiles? Well, they become Jewish. Not really, it's a verb. And a verb, you can translate it as being Jewish, becoming Jews, or Jewing, if that even makes sense. That would really be the most literal, accurate translation. The people were Jewing, which is the only use of this in the entire Old Testament. Okay, so it just shows that they're no longer the out group. They're now part of the in group, and people want to be part of the in group. Okay, some of this is real, but I would say probably a lot of it is not. Okay, so I'll go back to Reformation history. Okay? In Reformation history, there were several princes who truly believed and would die for the faith and justification by faith and what Martin Luther preached and taught, right? And then there were some who simply went, it'd be kind of nice to be free from Rome. They keep taking too much money, and so here this Martin Luther guy comes along, and other German princes, they're kind of like bucking the system, and they're getting away with it. I think I'll do that too. And so, along with the real heartfelt believing princes, you also have those who simply saw this as an opportunity. Okay? And then when the Counter-Reformation comes around, they all collapse. So, for a time, Poland was Lutheran. Counter-Reformation, back to Catholicism. And has remained Catholic ever since. So, okay? So this is just to kind of let you know that this is a profound shift, but a lot of it's simply self-serving. Some of it's real. Okay? How can I say that when the text doesn't say that? Read human history. And you'll go, yeah. Okay? So, even wow. Okay, one more thing. So, throughout history, you'll have different princes who will swear fealty, which is a personal allegiance to a particular king. Okay? And if you're really serious about that, really means a whole lot. But sometimes it doesn't. And so you'll have princes swear fealty to one king, and then the tide kind of shifts, and he thinks, well, if I support this king, I'm going to end up a dead man. And so much for his fealty, right? And so often the perception ends up bringing about the demise of the king to whom these princes swore their fealty. Okay, let's continue on. We're now entering chapter 9. Okay, chapter 9 and 10 kind of have a slightly different feel to it. Okay, so I don't know if it has a different editor because none of this stuff is revealed, but it feels a little different stylistically and whatnot. Okay, so let's go ahead and we'll begin. Now in the 12th month, which is the month of Adar, on the 13th day of the same, when the king's command edict were about to be carried out, on the very day when the enemies of the Jews hoped to gain mastery over them, okay, the reverse occurred. The Jews gained mastery over those who hated them. So we kind of have an idea that was going to happen just of what chapter 8 said, right? So in a sense, this is a little recap. Okay. The Jews gathered in their cities throughout the provinces of King Xerxes to lay hands on those who sought their harm, and no one could stand against them, for the fear of them had fallen on all the peoples. All the officials of the provinces and the satraps and the governors and the royal agents also helped the Jews, for fear of Mordecai had fallen on them. For Mordecai was great in the king's house, and his fame spread throughout all the provinces. For the man Mordecai grew more and more powerful. We got a little hint of this, didn't we, earlier? Where it looks like maybe he's kind of like a power dude. Maybe not as bad as Haman, and now this kind of implies, okay, is this just normal for the second in command, or is he kind of on a bit of a power grab? And people, I don't want to get Haman, I don't want to get Mordecai angry. He goes, whoa, that's bad. Okay, don't know. Okay. The Jews struck all their enemies with the sword, killing and destroying them, and did as they pleased to those who hated them. Okay. So gained mastery over those who hated them, that was mentioned. So this is a reversal of mastery, that is political power. Okay. Not simply a reversal of the violence. And we can kind of see that, can't we? Like, Mordecai, wow, he's a powerful guy. See? So it ends up kind of being one of these self-fulfilling prophecies, isn't it? So, I better not. And so it ends up kind of feeding itself. Okay? For Mordecai was great. And of course that's patterned after Exodus describing Moses. Okay? So if you're a Jew and you know your Old Testament really well, So the text really wants to say he's a figure like Moses, where the people are under him and they're supposed to do his bidding, which, well, I mean, hello, right? I mean, over after Moses died in Israel's history, kind of Moses grows in prominence, but when he was alive, people blew him off and spoke against him and groused and complained and so it's kind of after the fact where he becomes this giant figure. But while he was alive, wow, he just said, Lord, is there anybody else you can give this to? So it's not worth it. Okay. So yeah, that's kind of what's happening. We can kind of see this it's a shift in the tide. Okay? And so those who are stalwart and against the Jews, they're going to be exposed because they've had months to expose themselves, or quite a while. Okay? So let's continue and see what the text now says. In Susa, the citadel itself, the Jews killed and destroyed 500 men. And also, and it lists a whole bunch of names. I don't know any of these guys. I don't think you do either. Okay. And then the 10 sons of Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the enemy of the Jews, but they laid no hand on the plunder. Oh, so what happened to Haman's family? Yeah, so they're also killed. Okay, and so it's a collective nasty business. Of course, what did the edict say? Not only you, but your family, and even the animals and birds forever. So, okay, he's being hyperbolic, but still, it's not good. Okay, so this is simply what? Okay, don't do this because it's really bad news. Okay, and that's often how things go. Okay, I think the weirdest exception to this, if any of you guys follow North Korea, is they have this 3-generation rule, where if your grandfather did something bad, you suffer for whatever he did, which is okay. Or you do something bad, it's going to continue to your grandkids. Wow. I guess that's a great deterrent, unless you do something bad. Then if you do something bad, what do you have to lose? Right? So, okay. Okay, so let's continue on. Okay, so here we have, how many were killed in Susa? 500. So in a large city, that's not a huge amount. This is not a free-for-all, let's just kill everybody. So this is actually quite targeted. Okay, and then we're going to find out even the entire empire. Wow, that seems like a lot. But when you're thinking the population is estimated around 50 million. So, okay. Let's look at verses 11 through 15. That very day the number of those killed in Susa the citadel was reported to the king. And the king said to Queen Esther, in Susa the citadel the Jews have killed and destroyed 500 men, and also the 10 sons of Haman. What then have they done in the rest of the king's provinces? So Xerxes is saying, well, what's going on in the rest of the empire? Okay. Now, what is your wish? It shall be granted you. Okay. And what is further in your request? It shall be fulfilled. And Esther said, if it please the king, let the Jews who are in Susa be allowed tomorrow also to do according to this day's edict. Meaning what? Well, she's saying the Jews didn't really take care of or kill all their enemies. They were too nice. They only took care of the mean ones, right? It's like, wow. So she's saying, I want to make sure that, that we're not in threat for a while. And let the 10 sons of Haman be hanged on the gallows. Of course, they're dead. So what does this mean in Persia? Remember when they say hanged on the gallows? What is actually being meant? Oh, your body is hanging upon something, upon a spike, right? And so even though they're dead, she's saying, let's take his sons and put them on the spike so everyone could see them. What's the purpose of this? Right. So this is intimidation. Same thing crucifixion did, though crucifixion was actually worse than being piked. And because you see that and you go, oh, whatever he did, I'm never doing that because, I don't ever want that to happen to me. See, so it's deterrence. Same thing, it's gruesome, it's horrible, and most of the time it works. Unless you think you can get away with it. Oh, no. No, because if you see one, you'll go, no. The whole kind of cross as the Christian symbol, it only became prominent after crucifixions were outlawed because they were so gruesome. So it's only after when we kind of forgot how gruesome they were, then we're able to kind of appropriate Christ's crucifixion for us and not be totally creeped out by it. See, so even church history kind of lets us know how horrible a crucifixion was. So yeah, okay. So let's read the next two verses. We'll start at verse 14. So the king commanded this to be done. So, okay, we're going to have some deterrence going on and a little bit of mopping up. Okay. A decree was issued in Susa, and the 10 sons of Haman were hanged, put upon spikes. The Jews who were in Susa gathered also on the 14th day of the month of Adar and killed 300 men in Susa, but they laid no hands on the plunder. Why? This is twice that it was mentioned that they laid no hands on plunder. What's going on there? Right. Yes. So, we could say revenge, or, they're taking out the people who wanted to kill them, and they're not doing this for what? Self-gain, in the sense of stealing their wealth or whatever else, which is what Haman was planning to do. Okay, so this lets us know that it was controlled, that it was disciplined, and that it wasn't self-serving. So this is taking out those who are bent and intent on destroying us. So these are people who wanted to kill us, even though this edict saying not to do it came out. See, so this is bad, and these are people who are bearing a hateful grudge, and a lot of times people can't let that go. Okay, all right, so that's 9 through 15. Okay, and we'll go read 16 through 20, and then we'll finish a few minutes early. Okay. Now, what we're going to hear now is what happened in the rest of the empire. Everything that we've heard now is what went on between Xerxes and Esther, what took place in Susa. Now, the emperor said, well, what happened to the rest of the empire? Now we're going to know. Okay. Now the rest of the Jews who were in the king's provinces also gathered to defend their lives and got relief from the enemies and killed 75,000 of those who hated them. Okay. This was on the 13th day of the month of Adar, and on the 14th day they rested and made that day of feasting and gladness. Okay, remember what the edict said? So, okay, well, we need to be ready and protect our families, households, property, everything else. And then the next day, okay, we'll celebrate after the threat's gone. Okay? But the Jews who were in Susa gathered on the 13th day and on the 14th day and rested on the 15th day, making that day of feasting and gladness. Why? Well, because of Esther, right? Going to Xerxes, we need a little bit more. We need a little bit more house cleaning in the capital city. So it's 800. Okay? Therefore, the Jews of the villages who live in the rural towns hold the 14th day of the month of Adar as a day for gladness and feasting, as a holiday, as a day on which they send gifts of food to one another. So, right now, what does this tell you about chapter 9? It's almost a retrospective, right? At least that one verse, looking back. It's like, okay, well, we now have a few years that have passed, and this is what has now taken place, but it's still within the Persian Empire. So Greece hasn't yet taken over, But yes, yet this kind of celebrating of Purim has taken place, though as of now we don't yet know it's called Purim. We'll get into that next week. Okay, so what ironically, what did Haman's edict do when it was nullified? We don't want to say nullified when everyone was commanded not to do it. How did it actually benefit the Jews? Previously they were in the kingdom, but oddballs here and there, and because Mordecai said, Esther, don't let him know you're Jewish. So they were part of the empire, but they weren't part of a favored group of people. A lot of times it made best sense just to kind of hide your identity. Oh, be Jewish in private, but in public, just be Persian. Blend in. Well, now, so Haman says, well, hey, I'm going to kill everybody because I hate the Jews and I especially despise this man. So, I mean, if he had his way, I don't know. If he was able to control and discipline himself, he would probably kill Mordecai last, right? Because he hates him and despises him, and so he would want to make sure that he dies after Mordecai knows all of his people have been slaughtered, okay? And then, but Haman gets his comeuppance, and the enemies of people who hate the Jews, they're all exposed and officially gotten rid of. Now, even though we would go, well, this is kind of, you don't just do stuff like this and take vengeance. This is within a particular empire, and King Xerxes says, well, anybody who's harmful to the Persian Empire, ping. Okay, and so there it is. Okay, and so the Jews are in a better state, at least within the public functioning of the empire. Okay, they do, yes. So Purim is still celebrated, yes. So, all right, next week we'll finish up with Esther. Yeah. Okay. Just think about what you might like to study next week. We'll pray, and we'll have a little bit of time just to chit-chat or whatever before the service. We pray. Our Father, we are thankful for the life of Esther and how she navigated all of these crazy political machinations here and there, and yet she did her best to stay faithful, to be a faithful Jew who trusted in the Messiah to come. Let us learn from her example so we may have a ground of faith to navigate when we're not sure of the way we should go. May we be grounded in such truths that if there is nothing in your word that tells us to go right, left, we may have a good way to know. In our Savior's name we pray. Amen.